All right. I think we are about ready to make it happen. Ah, got my water. Check. Got my soothing tea. Check. Got my Astounding Stories of Super Science, May 1930. Got my audience. No check, but that's not really any change from the usual state of affairs. As ever, whatever. I know what I do is niche, and I probably don't have the best presentation in the world. And you know what? Tough. Nobody wants to give me feedback, I will never improve. So I just hope for other people to tune in and tell me what I'm doing wrong. Uh, in other news, I have the YouTube channel more or less up to date as of the beginning of this week. I do not think I've got the most recent Mecha Mondays and definitely not the most recent Warframe Wednesday stuff uploaded, but everything else is. Because I've been having difficulty with my streaming software cutting out midstream, they wind up being broken up into little chunky segments with gaps, which upsets the hell out of me, but nothing I could do about it. Short actually learning how to use the video editing software I've got floating around on my computer somewhere, which won't be today. Isn't that nice? So, last time, previously on Brigands of the Moon, the Planetara crashed on the moon, near-ish to the Grantline radium ore dig, which is the focus of all the plotting and planning that's been going on by the Brigands, who incidentally don't originate from the moon, but they are planning to do brigandry in, on, and around the moon. Our moon, not just any moon. Luna. Our moon apparently has radium, according to this 1930 science fiction story. I actually have no idea if the moon has radium. It has other things like moon dust that is shaped like sickles covered in barbed wire, and therefore really bad for your eyes. Gets in everything and doesn't easily leave. Um, it may or may not have helium-3. By the same coin, it may or may not have moon Nazis who flew there sometime around World War II and decided it would be a good idea to take up shop there. Referencing, of course, the movie Iron Sky. The sequel, not so much. Not so much. Felt like it was not sticking to its brilliant core concepts well enough for my taste. It was fun, but it was dumb. The original Iron Sky was also fun, but very dumb, but it seemed to be more fun than dumb, I guess, if that makes any sense at all. I know a few people who would disagree heartily on that, mostly in the negative, saying it was neither fun nor intelligent. And you should not lie to these poor people who may or may not have seen the film. If you have not seen the film, it's fun. It's dumb, but it's fun. My personal favorite is the USB joke. Quite fond of that one. Also, all the laughing at North Korea, which, you know, or maybe you don't. I don't know. Okay, where are we? Here we are. Brigands of the Moon. I've rambled and prattled on long enough. Hope y'alls are ready to be read at. Not to, read at. My basic pattern for these has largely been to do, it is, quote, a four-part novel, unquote, with each installment appearing in the concurrent month of the next month along of Astounding Stories of Super Science, starting in March, going to I think it's June, or is it July? March, April, May, June, June. I put July in my stream description. I'm an idiot, apparently. Sorry. Uh, and what I've been doing is so far each one of those parts has been worth about two-hour-ish streams. So this will be the first half of part 3. Oh gosh, and the footnotes begin already. Nice. There are footnotes early. Jeez Louise, how many? Okay, they're mostly right in the beginning. They don't continue after that. I'm skimming ahead real quick just to see if... Oh, the object shot forth another... Oh, that's from something else. What is that from? The Jovian Jest. Jovian Jest by Lilith Lorraine? I think I've read this. Not on stream, though. I should have done. Sorry, I've skipped way ahead. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many chapters? That's 33. We're on in the beginning here. Should be like 23. Yeah, okay. So 5 chapters roughly, give or take. Let me skip ahead here because I planned these out, obviously, as everyone knows, so impeccably well. Actually, well, we'll see what time it is by the like when we hit like 2 hours from now. We'll see what time it is and how far along we are and go from there. This chunk might actually be smaller than the others. I'm not sure. Oh, that is still volcanic in temperature. Yes, burning my tongue before trying to read out loud. Real clever. Okay. Brigands of the Moon, The Book of Greg Haljan, Part 3 of a 4-part novel by Ray Cummings. What has gone before? One day in 2075, the interplanetary spaceship Planetara left the Earth from Mars. I, Greg Haljan, was third officer. It was destined to be a tragic voyage, for in our midst were unscrupulous brigands, masquerading as harmless passengers, intent on seizing the secret treasure of radium ore Johnny Grantline of the Grantline Expedition had dug from the moon. The Planetara was to stop on the moon and pick the treasure up on her return trip from Mars. Miko, a giant Martian, and his sister, Moa, were the ringleaders. With them were, as passengers, Sir Arthur Coniston and Ob Hahn, a Venus mystic. The whole crew was in their pay. Miko struck. The captain was killed, as were the officers. Only Snap Dean, the radio helio operator, Venza, a girl of Venus, and I were left. And, of course, Anita Prince, who had captivated my heart upon my first glimpse of her. The brigands abandoned the other passengers on a small asteroid, and Miko signaled his spaceship far off on Mars to meet him on the moon. I was forced to guide the Planetara to the moon. We sighted the huts of the Grantline expedition, and suddenly, just as we started to descend, the controls snapped, and the Planetara tumbled like a spent rocket. Desperately, I tried to check her, but only partially succeeded. We crashed horribly against the barren gray rock of the moon. Anita, Venza, Snap, and I lived through it, but we could not find the bodies of Miko and Moa in the wreckage. Evidently, they were still alive somewhere. We reached Johnny Grantline. The Planetara was a complete wreck. And, speeding to us from Mars, was Miko's brigand ship. We were powerless, without means of leaving the moon, and completely at the mercy of Miko's fast approaching brigands. Chapter 23. The Prowling Watchman.
Try it again, Snap urged. Good God, Johnny, we've got to raise some Earth station. Chance it. Use your power. Run it up to the full. Chance it.
We were gathered in Grantline's instrument room. The duty man, with blanched, grim face, sat at his senders. The Grantline crew shoved close around us, tense and silent. Above everything, we must make some Earth station aware of our plight. Conditions were against us. There were very few observers in the high-powered Earth stations who knew that an exploring party was on the moon. Perhaps none of them. The government officials who had sanctioned the expedition, and Halsey and his confreres in the Detective Bureau, were not anticipating trouble now. The Planetara was supposed to be well on her course to Ferrok-Shan. It was when she was due to return that Halsey would be alert. And it seemed, too, that nature was against us. The bulging half-Earth, and there's a footnote here. Maybe? Oh, it's right there. Sorry. The bulging half-Earth, and the footnote says, between the half and the full illumined disk, the complete Earth now was some 10 days old. The bulging half-Earth hung poised near the zenith over our little crater. Its rotation through the hours was clearly visible. We timed our signals when the western hemisphere was facing us. But nature was against us. No clouds, no faintest hint of mist could fog the airless lunar surface. But there were continuous clouds over the Americas.
Try it again, Snap urged.
These bulging walls! Grantline used his power far beyond the limits of safety. He cut down his lights. The telescope intensifiers were permanently disconnected. The ventilators were momentarily stilled, so that the air here in the little room crowded with men rapidly grew fetid. All to save power pressure, that the vital Erentz system might survive. Even so, it was strained to the danger point. The walls seemed to bulge outward with the pressure of the room, the aluminite braces straining and creaking. And our heat was radiating away. The deadly chill of space crept in. "Again!" ordered Grantline. The duty man flung on the power in rhythmic pulses. In the silence, the tubes hissed. The light sprang through the banks of rotating prisms, intensified up the scale until, with a vague, almost invisible beam, it left the last swaying mirror and leaped through our overhead dome into space. "Commander!" The duty man's voice carried an appeal. These bulging walls! If they cracked or even sprung a serious leak, the camp would be uninhabitable. "Enough," said Grantline. "Switch it off. We'll let it go at that for now." It seemed that every man in the room had been holding his breath in the darkness. The lights came on again. The Erentz motors accelerated to normal. The strain on the walls eased up, and the room began warming. Had the Earth caught our signal? We did not want to waste the power to find out. Our receivers were disconnected. If an answering signal came, we could not know it. One of the men said,
"Let's assume they saw us."
He laughed, but it was a high-pitched, tense laugh.
"We don't even dare use the telescope. Our rescue ship will be right overhead, visible to the naked eye before we see it. 3 days more. That's what I'll give it."
But the 3 days passed, and no rescue ship came. The Earth was almost at the full. We tried signaling again. Perhaps it got through. We did not know. But our power was weaker now. The wall of one of the rooms sprang a leak, and the men were hours repairing it. I did not say so, but never once did I feel that our signals were seen on Earth. Those cursed clouds! The Earth was almost everywhere. The Earth almost everywhere seemed to have poor visibility. 4 of our 8 days of grace were all too soon past. The brigand ship must be halfway here by now. They were busy days for us. If we could have captured Miko and his band, our danger would have been less imminent. With the treasure insulated so that its gamma rays could not betray us, and our camp in darkness, the arriving brigand ship might never find us. But Miko knew our location. He would signal his oncoming ship when it was close and lead it to us. 3 times during those days, and the days which followed them, Grantline sent out searching parties. But it was unavailing. Miko, Moa, and Coniston, with their 5 underlings, could not be found. We searched all the territory from the camp to the Planetara, and off to the foot crags of Archimedes, and a score of miles into the flatness of the Mare Imbrium. There was no sign of the brigands. Yet we knew they could be near here. It was so easy to hide amid the tumbled crags, the ravines, the gullies, the numberless craters and pit holes, or underground in the vast honeycombed subterranean recesses. We had at first hoped that the brigands might have perished, but that was soon dispelled. I went, about the 3rd day, with the party that was sent to the Planetara. We wanted to salvage such of its equipment, its unbroken power units, as might be available. And Snap and I had worked out an idea which we thought might be of service. We needed some of the Planetara's smaller gravity plate sections. Those in Grantline's wrecked little comet had stood so long that their radiations had gone dead. But the Planetara's were still efficacious. We secured the fragments of Newtonia, and there's a footnote here. An allusion to the element Newtonia, named in memory of the great founder of celestial mechanics, Sir Isaac Newton. Artificially electronized, this metal element may be charged either positively or negatively, thus to attract or repel other masses of matter. The gravity plates of all spaceships were built of it. But our hope that Miko might have perished was dashed. He too had returned to the Planetara. The evidence was clear before us. The vessel was stripped of all its power units, save those which were dead and useless. The last of the food and water stores was taken. The weapons in the chart room, the Benson curve lights, bullet projectors, and heat rays, had vanished. Other days passed. The Earth reached the full and began waning. The 28-day lunar night was in its last half. No rescue ship came from Earth. We had ceased our efforts to signal, for we needed all our power to maintain ourselves. The camp would be in a state of siege. That was the best we could hope for. We had a few short-range weapons, such as Bensons, heat rays, and rifles. A few hundred feet of effective range was the most any of them could obtain. The heat rays, in giant form one of the most deadly weapons on Earth, were only slowly efficacious on the airless moon. Striking an intensely cold surface, their warming radiations, without atmosphere to aid them, were slow to act. Even in a blasting heat beam, a man in his Erentz helmet suit could withstand a ray for several minutes. We were, however, well equipped with explosives. Grantline had brought a large supply for his mining operations, and much of it was still unused. We had, also, an ample stock of oxygen fuses, and a variety of oxygen light flares in small, fragile glass globes. It was to use these explosives against the brigands that Snap and I were working out our scheme with the gravity plates. The brigand ship would come with giant projectors, and with some 30 men. If we could hold out against them for a time, the fact that the Planetara was missing would bring us help from Earth.
A month, said Grantline. A month at most. If we can hold them off that long, even in a week or two, help may come.
Another day. A tenseness fell on us all, despite the absorption of our feverish activities. To conserve the power, the camp was almost dark. We lived in dim, chill rooms, with just a few weak spots of light outside to mark the watchmen on their rounds. We did not use the telescope, and there's a footnote here. An old-fashioned telescope of limited field and needing no electronic power would have been immensely serviceable to Grantline, but his was of the more modern type. We did not use the telescope, but there was scarcely an hour when one or the other of the men was not sitting on a crosspiece up in the dome of the little instrument room, casting tense, searching gazes into the black, starry firmament. A ship might appear any time now, a rescue ship from Earth, or the Brigands from Mars. Anita and Venza during these days could aid us very little save by their cheering words. They moved about the rooms, trying to inspire us, so that all the men, when they might have been humanly sullen and cursing their fate, were turned to grim activity, or grim laughter, making a joke of this coming siege. The morale of the camp now was perfect, an improvement indeed over the inactivity of the former peaceful weeks. Grantline mentioned it to me. "We'll put up a good fight, Haljan. These fellows from Mars will know they've had a task before they ever sail off with this treasure." I had many moments alone with Anita. I need not mention them. It seemed that our love was crossed by the stars, with an adverse fate dooming it. And Snap and Venza must have felt the same. Among the men we were always quietly, grimly active, but alone. I came upon Snap once with his arms around the little Venus girl. I heard him say,
Accursed luck that you and I should find each other too late, Venza. We could have a mighty lot of fun in great New York together.
"Snap, we will." As I turned away, I murmured, "And pray God, so will Anita and I." The girls slept together in a small room of the main building. Often, during the time of sleep, when the camp was stilled except for the night watch, Snap and I would sit in the corridor near the girls' door grid, talking of that time when we would all be back on our blessed Earth. Our 8 days of grace were past. The brigand ship was due, now, tomorrow, or the next day. I recall that night my sleep was fitfully uneasy. Snap and I had a cubby together. We talked and made futile plans. I went to sleep, but awakened after a few hours. Impending disaster lay heavily on me. But there was nothing abnormal nor unusual in that. Snap was asleep. I was restless, but I did not have the heart to awaken him. He needed what little repose he could get. I dressed, left our cubby, and wandered out into the corridor of the main building. It was cold in the corridor, and gloomy with the weak blue light. An interior watchman passed me. "All as usual, Haljan." "Nothing in sight?" "Nah, they're looking." I went through the connecting corridor to the adjacent building. In the instrument room, several of the men were gathered, scanning the vault overhead. "Nothing, Haljan." I stayed with them a while, then wandered away. The outside man met me near the admission lock chambers of the main building. The duty man here sat at his controls, raising the air pressure in the locks through which the outside watchman was coming. The relief sat here in his bloated suit, with his helmet on his knees. It was Wilkes.
Nothing yet, Haljan. I'm going up to the peak of the crater to see if anything is in sight. I wish that damnable brigand ship would come and get it over with."
Instinctively, we all spoke in half whispers, the tenseness bearing in on us. The outside man came out of his helmet. He was white and grim, but he grinned at Wilkes. "All as usual." He tried the familiar jest at Wilkes, but his voice was flat. "Don't let the Earthlight get you." Wilkes went out through the ports, a process of no more than a minute. I wandered away again through the corridors. I suppose it was half an hour later that I chanced to be gazing through a corridor window. The lights along the rocky cliff edge were tiny blue spots. The head of the stairway leading down to the abyss of the crater floor was visible. The bloated figure of Wilkes was just coming up. I watched him for a moment, making his rounds. He did not stop to inspect the lights. That was routine. I thought it queer that he passed them. Another minute passed. The figure of Wilkes went with slow bounds over toward the back of the ledge where the glassite shelter housed the treasure. It was all dark off there. Wilkes went into the gloom, but before I lost sight of him, he came back. As though he had changed his mind, he headed for the foot of the staircase, which led up the cliff face. Oh my gosh! Which led up the cliff face to where, at the peak of the little crater, 500 feet above us, the narrow observatory platform was perched. He climbed with easy bounds, the light on his helmet bobbing in the gloom. I stood, watching. I could not tell why there seemed to be something queer about Wilkes's actions, but I was struck with it nevertheless. I watched him disappear over the peak of the summit. Another minute went by. Wilkes did not reappear. I thought I could make out his light on the platform up there. Then, abruptly, a tiny white beam was waving from the observatory platform. It flashed once or twice, then was extinguished. And now I saw Wilkes plainly, standing in the earthlight, gazing down. Queer actions. Had the earthlight touched him? Or was that a local signal call which he had sent out? Why should Wilkes be signaling? What was he doing with a hand helio? Our watchman, I knew, had no reason to carry one. And to whom could Wilkes be signaling across this lunar desolation? The answer stabbed at me. To Miko's band! I waited another moment. No further light. Wilkes was still up there. I went back to the lock entrance. Spare suits and helmets were here beside the keeper. He gazed at me inquiringly. "I'm going out, Frank, just for a minute." It struck me that perhaps I was a meddlesome fool. Wilkes, of all of Grantline's men, I knew, most in his commander's trust. The signal could have been some part of this night's ordinary routine, for all I knew. I was hastily donning an errant's suit. I added, "Let me out. I just got the idea Wilkes is acting queerly." I laughed. "Maybe the Earthlight has touched him." With my helmet on, I went through the locks. Once outside, with the outer panel closed behind me, I dropped the weights from my belt and shoes and extinguished my helmet light. Wilkes was still up there. Apparently he had not moved. I bounded off across the ledge to the foot of the ascending stairs. Did Wilkes see me coming? I could not tell. As I approached the stairs, the platform was cut off from my line of vision. I mounted with bounding leaps. In my flexible gloved hand I carried my only weapon, a small bullet projector with oxygen firing caps for use in this outside near vacuum. The leaden bullet with its slight mass would nevertheless pierce a man at the distance of 20 feet. I held the weapon behind me. I would talk to Wilkes first. I went slowly up the last 100 feet. Was Wilkes still up there? The summit was bathed in earthlight. The little metal observatory platform came into view above my head. Wilkes was not there. Then I saw him standing on the rocks nearby, motionless. But in a moment he saw me coming. I waved my left arm with a gesture of greeting. It seemed to me that he started, made as though to leap away, then changed his mind and waited for me. I sailed from the head of the staircase with a 20-foot leap and landed lightly beside him. I gripped his arm for audiophone contact. "Wilkes!" Through the visors his face was visible. I saw him, and he saw me, and I heard his voice.
"You, Haljan? How nice!"
It was not Wilkes, but the brigand Coniston. I acknowledge that it's basically plot to keep the plot rolling, but I tell you, Greg Haljan has no luck whatsoever. The wrong man in the right place can make all the difference in the world. etc., and so on and so forth. That was a rubbish G-Man impersonation. I should be ashamed. I'm not. I'm not. Okay. That's right. Scroll too far, dude. There we go. Chapter 24. Imprisoned. The duty man at the exit locks of the main building stood at his window and watched me curiously. He saw me go up the spider stairs. He could see the figure he thought was Wilkes standing at the top. He saw me join Wilkes, saw us locked together in combat. For an instant the duty man stood amazed. There were two fantastic, misshapen figures swaying in the earthlight 500 feet above the camp, fighting desperately at the very brink. They were small, dwarfed by distance, alternately dim and bright as they swayed in and out of the shadows. Soon the duty man could not tell one man from the other. Haljan and Wilkes, fighting to the death. The duty man recovered himself and sprang into action. An interior siren call was on the instrument panel near him. He rang it, alarming the camp. The men came rushing to him, Grantline among them.
What's this? Good God, Frank!
They saw the silent, deadly combat up there on the cliff. The two figures had fallen together from the observatory platform, dropped 20 feet to a lower landing on the stairs. They lay as though stunned for a moment, then fought on. Grantline stood stricken with amazement.
That's Wilkes!
And Haljan, the duty man gasped. Went out. Something wrong with Wilkes. Acting strangely. The interior of the camp was in a turmoil. The men awakened from sleep, ran out into the corridors, shouted questions.
An attack?
Is it an attack? The Brigands? But it was Wilkes and Haljan in a fight out there on the cliff. The men crowded at the bullseye windows. And over all the confusion, the alarm siren, with no one thinking to shut it off, was screaming with its electrical voice. Grantline, stricken for that moment of inactivity, stood gazing. One of the figures broke away from the other, bounded up to the summit from the stair platform to which they had fallen. The other followed. They locked together, swaying at the brink. For an instant it seemed to Grantline that they would go over, then they surged back momentarily out of sight. Grantline found his wits.
Stop them! I'll go out to stop them! What fools!
He was hastily donning one of the errant suits which stood at the lock entrance.
Shut off that siren, Frank!
Within a minute Grantline was ready. The duty man called from the window.
Still at it! By the infernal, such fools, they'll kill themselves!
The figures had swayed back into view, then out of sight again.
Frank, let me out.
Grantline was ready. He stood, helmet in hand. I'll go with you, Commander. But the volunteer was not equipped. Grantline would not wait.
I'm going at once. Hurry, Frank.
The duty man turned to his panel. The volunteer shoved a weapon at Grantline. Here, take this. Grantline jammed on his helmet. He moved the few steps into the small air chamber which was the first of the three pressure locks. Its interior door panels swung open for him, but the door did not close after him. Cursing the duty man's slowness, he waited a few seconds. Then he turned to the corridor. The duty man came running. Grantline took off his helmet.
What in hell?
Broken dead.
What?
Smashed from outside, gasped the duty man. Look there, my tubes. The control tubes of the ports had flashed into a closed circuit and burned out. The admission ports would not open. The pressure controls smashed, broken from outside. There was no way now of getting out through these pressure locks. The doors, the entire pressure lock system, was dead. Had it been tampered with from outside? As though to answer Grantline's amazed question, there came a chorus of shouts from the men at the corridor windows. "Commander! By God, look!" A figure was outside, close to the building. Clothed in suit and helmet, it stood, bloated and gigantic. It had evidently been lurking at the port entrance, had ripped out the wires there. It moved past the windows, saw the staring faces of the men, and made off with giant bounds. Grantline reached the window in time to see it vanish around the building corner. It was a giant figure, larger than a normal Earthman. A Martian? Up on the summit of the crater, the two small figures were still fighting. All this turmoil had taken no more than a minute or two. A lurking Martian outside? The brigand Miko? More than ever, Grantline was determined to get out. He shouted to his men to don some of the other suits, and called for some of the hand bullet projectors. But he could not get out through these main admission ports. He could have forced the panels open, perhaps, but with the pressure-changing mechanisms broken, it would merely let the air out of the corridor. A rush of air, probably uncontrollable. How serious the damage was, no one could tell as yet. It would perhaps take hours to repair it. Grantline was shouting. "Get those weapons! That's a Martian outside. The brigand leader, probably. Get into your suits, anyone who wants to go with me. We'll go by the manual emergency exit." But the prowling Martian had found it. Within a minute, Grantline was there. It was a smaller two-lock gateway of manual control, so that the person going out could operate it himself. It was in a corridor at the other end of the main building. But Grantline was too late. The lever would not open the panels. Had someone gone out this way and broken the mechanisms after him? A traitor in the camp? Or had someone come in from outside? Or had the skulking Martian outside broken this lock as he had broken the other? The questions surged on Grantline. His men crowded around him. The news spread. The camp was a prison. No one could get out. And outside, the skulking Martian had disappeared. But Wilkes and Haljan were still fighting. Grantline could see the two figures up on the observatory platform. They bounded apart, then together again, crazily swaying, bouncing, striking the rail. They went together in a great leap off the platform onto the rocks, and rolled in a bright patch of Earthlight. First one on top, then the other, they rolled unheeding to the brink. Here, beyond the midway ledge which held the camp, it was a sheer drop of 1,000 feet on down to the crater floor. The figures were rolling. Then one shook himself loose, rose up, seized the other, and, with a desperate lunge, shoved him. The victorious figure drew back to safety. The other fell, hurtling down into the shadows past the camp level, down out of sight in the darkness of the crater floor. Snap, who was in the group near Grantline at the windows, gasped.
God, was that Greg Haljan who fell?
No one could say. No one answered. Outside, on the camp ledge, another helmeted figure now became visible. It was not far from the main building when Grantline first noticed it. It was running fast, bounding toward the spider staircase. It began mounting. And now, still another figure became visible. The giant Martian again. He appeared from around the corner of the main Grantline building. He evidently saw the winner of the combat on the cliff, who now was standing in the Earthlight, gazing down. And he saw, too, no doubt, the second figure mounting the stairs. He stood quite near the window through which Grantline and his men were gazing, with his back to the building, looking up to the summit. Then he ran with tremendous leaps toward the ascending staircase. Was it Haljan standing up there on the summit? Who was it climbing the staircase? And was the third figure Miko? Grantline's mind framed the questions, but his attention was torn from them, and torn even from the swift, silent drama outside. The corridor was ringing with shouts. "We're imprisoned! Can't get out! Was Haljan killed? The brigands are outside!" Then an interior audiophone blared a call for Grantline. Someone in the instrument room of the adjoining building was talking. "Commander, I tried the telescope to see who got killed." But he did not say who got killed, for he had greater news. "Commander, the brigand ship." Miko's reinforcements from Mars had come. The dramatic tension is palpable, folks. You can taste it. You can taste it. It's delicious. Well, actually, kind of tangy, I would think. How does your dramatic tension taste, ladies and gents? That's a good question. Get more water in me. It's thirsty work. Okay. Chapter 25: The Combat on the Crater Top. Not Wilkes, but Coniston, his drawling British voice. "You, Greg Haljan? How nice!" His voice broke off as he jerked his arm from me. My hand with the bullet projector came up, but with a sweeping blow he struck my wrist. The weapon dropped to the rocks. I fought instinctively, those first moments. My mind was whirling with the shock of surprise. This was not Wilkes, but the brigand Coniston. His blow wrenched him around. Awkward, fighting in the air-puffed suits, with only a body weight of some 30 pounds. Coniston stumbled over the rocks. I had still scarce recovered my wits, but I avoided his outflung arms, and, stooping, tried to recover my revolver. It lay nearby. But Coniston followed my scrambling steps and fell upon me. My foot struck the weapon. It slid away and fell down a crag into a 6-foot pit. We locked together, and when I rose erect he had me around the middle. His voice jangled with broken syllables in my receiver.
"Do for you now, Haljan."
It was an eerie combat. We swayed, shoving, kicking, wrestling. His hold around my middle shut off the Erentz circulation. The warning buzz rang in my ears to mingle with the rasp of his curses. I flung him off, and my tiny Erentz motors recovered. He staggered away, but in a great leap came at me again. I was taller, heavier, and far stronger than Coniston, but I found him crafty, and where I was awkward in handling my lightness, he seemed more skillfully agile. I became aware that we were on the 20-foot square grid of the observatory platform. It had a low metal railing. We surged against it. I caught a dizzying glimpse of the abyss. Then it receded as we bounced the other way. And then we fell to the grid. His helmet bashed against mine, striking as though butting with the side of his head to puncture my visor panel. His gloved fingers were trying to rip at the fabric around my throat. As we regained our feet, I flung him off and bounded like a diver head first into him. He went backward, but skillfully kept his feet, gripped me again, and shoved me. I was tottering at the head of the staircase, falling, but I clutched at him. We fell some 20 or 30 feet to the next lower spider landing. The impact must have dazed us both. I recall my vague idea that we had fallen down the cliff. My Erentz motors smashed. My air shut off. Then the air came again. The roaring in my ears was stilled. My head cleared, and I found that we were on the landing, fighting. He presently broke away from me, bounded to the summit, with me after him. In the close confines of the suit I was bathed in sweat, and gasping. I had had no thought to increase the oxygen content of my air, but I sorely needed more oxygen for my laboring, pounding heart and my panting breath. I fumbled for the oxygen control lever. I could not find it, or it would not operate. I realized I was fighting sluggishly, almost aimlessly. But so was Coniston. It seemed dreamlike, a phantasmagoria of blows and staggering steps, a nightmare with only the horrible vision of this goggled helmet always before my eyes. It seemed to me that we were rolling on the ground, back on the summit. The unshadowed earthlight was clear and bright. The abyss was beside me. Coniston, rolling, was now on top, now under me, trying to shove me over the brink. It was all like a dream, as though I were asleep, dreaming that I did not have enough air. I strove to keep my senses. He was struggling to roll me over the brink. That would not do. But I was so tired. One cannot fight without oxygen. I suddenly knew that I had shaken him off and gained my feet. He rose up, swaying. He was as tired, confused, half asphyxiated as I. The brink of the abyss was behind us. I lunged, desperately shoving, avoiding his clutch. He went over and fell soundlessly, his body whirling end over end down into the shadows, far down. I drew back. My senses faded as I sank, panting, to the rocks. But with inactivity, my thumping heart quieted. My respirations slowed. The errant's circulation gained on my poisoned air. It purified. That blessed oxygen! My head cleared again. Strength came to me. I felt better. Coniston had fallen to his death. I was the victor. I went to the brink, cautiously, for I was still dizzy. I could see, far down there on the crater floor, a little patch of earthlight in which a mashed human figure was lying. I staggered back again. A moment or two must have passed while I stood there on the summit, with my senses clearing and my strength renewed as the bloodstream cleared my veins. I was victor. Coniston was dead. I saw now, down on the lower staircase below the camp ledge, another goggled figure lying huddled. That was Wilkes, no doubt. Coniston had doubtless caught him there, surprised him, killed him. My attention, as I stood gazing, went down to the camp buildings. Another figure was outside. It bounded along the ledge, reached the foot of the ascending staircase at the top of which I was standing. With agile leaps it came mounting at me. Another brigand! Miko? No, it was not large enough to be Miko, not nearly large enough. I was still confused. I thought of Han, but that was absurd. Han was in the wreck of the Planetara. One of the stewards, then. The figure came up the staircase recklessly to assail me. I took a step backward, bracing myself to receive this new antagonist. And then I saw Miko. Unquestionably he, for there was no mistaking his giant figure. He was down on the camp ledge, running toward the foot of the staircase, coming up to help this other man in advance of him. I thought of my revolver. I turned to try and find it. I was aware that the first of my assailants was at the stairhead. I could not locate at once where the revolver had fallen. I would be caught, leapt upon from behind. Should I run? I swung back to see what the oncoming brigand was doing. He had reached the summit. His arms went up, legs bent under him. With a sailing leap he launched for me. I could have bounded way, but with a last look to locate the revolver, I braced myself for the shock. The figure hit me. It was small and light in my clutching arms. I recall I saw that Miko was halfway up the staircase. I gripped my assailant. The audiophone contact brought a voice.
Greg, is it you?
It was Anita clutching at me. Chapter 26 At Bay.
Greg, you're safe.
She had heard the camp corridors resounding with the shouts that Wilkes and Haljan were fighting. She had come upon a suit and helmet by the manual emergency lock, had run out through the lock, confused, with her only idea to stop Wilkes and me from fighting. Then she had seen one of us killed. Impulsive, barely knowing what she was doing, she mounted the stairs, frantic to find if I were alive.
Anita.
Miko was coming. She had not seen him, for she had no thought of brigands, only the belief that either Wilkes or I had been killed. But now, as for an instant we stood together on the rocks near the observation platform, I could see the towering figure of Miko nearing the top of the stairs.
Anita, that's Miko. We must run.
Then I saw my bullet projector. It lay in a bowl-like depression quite near us. I jumped for it. And as I tore loose from Anita, she leapt down after me. It was a broken bowl in the rocks, some 6 feet deep. It was open on the side facing the staircase, a narrow, ravine-like gully full of gray, broken, tumbled rock masses. The little gully was littered with crags and boulders, but I could see out through it. Miko had come to the head of the staircase. He stopped there, his great figure etched sharply by the earthlight. I think he must have known that Coniston was the one who had fallen over the cliff, as my helmet and Coniston's were different enough for him to recognize which was which. He did not know who I was, but he did know me for an enemy. He stood now at the summit, peering to see where we had gone. He was no more than 50 feet from us.
Anita, lie down.
I pulled her down on the rocks. I took aim with the bullet projector, but I had forgotten our helmet lights. Miko must have seen them just as I pulled the trigger. The flying bullet missed him as he jumped sideways. He dropped, but I could see him moving in the shadows to where a jutting rock gave him shelter. I fired again.
Greg.
I had stood up to take aim. I took the bullet chip off. I saw the bullet chip a bit of rock. Oh my gosh, let's try that again. I saw the bullet chip a bit of rock. Anita pulled me sharply down beside her.
Greg, he's armed.
It was his turn to fire. It came, the familiar vague flash of the paralyzing ray. It spat its tint of color on the rocks near us, but could not reach us. Miko rose a moment later and bounded to another rock. I scrambled up and shot at him, but missed. Then he crouched and returned my fire from his new angle, but Anita and I shifted. Had shifted. Anita and I had shifted. Sorry, this is falling apart. Time passed, only a few moments. I could not see Miko momentarily. Perhaps he was crouching. Perhaps he had moved away again. He was, or had been, on slightly higher ground than the bottom of our bowl. It was dim down here where we were lying, but I feared that every moment Miko might appear and strike at us. His ray at any short range would penetrate our visor panes, even though our suits might temporarily resist it.
Anita, it's too dangerous here.
Had I been alone, I might perhaps have leaped up to lure Miko, but with Anita I did not dare chance it.
We've got to get back to the camp,
I told her. The audio phone brought her comment.
Perhaps he is gone.
But he had not. We saw him again, out in a distant patch of earthlight. He was further from us than before, but still on higher ground. We had extinguished our small helmet lights, but he knew we were here, and possibly he could see us. His projector flashed again, but we had again shifted, and were untouched. He was 100 feet or more away now. His weapon was of longer range than mine. I did not answer his fire, for I could not hope to hit him at such a distance, and the flash of my weapon would help him with his aim. I murmured to Anita.
We must get out of here.
Yet how did I dare take Anita from these concealing shadows? Miko could reach us so easily as we bounded away, in plain view in the earthlight of the open summit. We were caught, at bay in this little bowl. The camp from here was not visible, But out through the broken gully, beyond the staircase top, a white beam of light suddenly came up from below. Haljan. It spelled the signal. Haljan. It was coming from the Grantline instrument room, I knew. I could answer with my helmet light, but I did not dare. I hesitated.
Try it,
urged Anita. We crouched where we thought we might be safe from Miko's fire. My little light beam shot up from the bowl. It was undoubtedly visible to the camp. Yes, I am Haljan. And I added, help! Send us help! I did not mention Anita. Miko could doubtless read these signals, and in the camp they must have missed Anita by now. They answered, cannot. I lost the rest of it. There came a flash from Miko's weapon, but it gave us confidence. He could not reach us at the moment. The Grantline beam repeated, cannot come out. Ports broken. You cannot get in. Stay where you are. An hour or two. We may be able to repair ports. The ports were broken. Stay here an hour or two. But I could not hold this position against Miko that long. Sooner or later he would find a place from where he could sweep this bowl beyond possibility of our hiding. I saw him running now, well beyond my range, to ferret out another point of vantage. I extinguished my light. What use was it to tell Grantline anything further? Besides, my light was dangerous. But the Grantline beam spelled another message. The brigand ship is coming. It will be here before we can get out to you. No lights. We will try and hide our location. And the signal beam brought a last appeal to me. Miko and his men will divulge where we are. Unless you can stop them. The beam vanished. The lights of the Grantline camp made a faint glow that showed above the crater edge. The glow died, as the camp was now plunged into darkness. Chapter 27. Anita's Plan. We crouched in the shadows, the earthlight filtering down to us. The skulking figure of Miko had vanished, but he was out there somewhere on the crags, I was sure, lurking, maneuvering to where he could strike us with his ray. Anita's metal-gloved hand was on my arm. In my ear diaphragm, her voice sounded eager and unmistakable.
What was the signal, Greg?
She could not read the semaphore lights. I told her.
Oh, Greg, the Martian ship coming.
Her mind clung to that as the most important thing. But not so myself. To me, there was only the realization that Anita was caught out here, almost at the mercy of Miko's ray. Grantline's men could not get out to help us, nor could I get Anita into the camp. She added,
Where do you suppose the ship is? In telescopic view?
Yes, 20 or 30,000 miles up, probably. The stars and the earth were visible over us. Somewhere up there, disclosed by Grantline's instrument, but not yet discernible to the naked eye, Miko's reinforcements were hovering. I stood up cautiously to try and locate Miko. Immediately I saw him. He jumped as though fearing my coming bullet, and I dropped back, barely avoiding his flash, which swept across the top of our bowl.
Greg, don't take such a chance.
We lay for a moment in silence. It was horribly nerve-straining. Miko could be creeping up on us. Would he dare chance my sudden fire? Creeping, or would he make a swift, unexpected rush? The feeling that he was upon us abruptly swept me. I jumped to my feet, against Anita's effort to hold me. But again Miko had vanished. Where was he now? I sank back.
That ship will be here in a few hours.
I told her what Grantline's signal had suggested. The ship was hovering overhead. It must be fairly close, for Grantline's telescope had revealed its identity as a bandit flyer, unmarked by any of the standard code identification lights. It was doubtless too far away as yet to have located the whereabouts of Grantline's camp. The Martian brigands knew that we were in the vicinity of Archimedes, but no more than that. Searching this glowing moon surface, our little lights, the tiny local semaphore beams we had momentarily been using, could easily pass unnoticed. But as the brigand ship approached now, dropping close to Archimedes as it probably would, our danger was that Miko and his men would then signal it, join it, and reveal the camp's location, and the brigand attack would be upon us. I told this now to Anita.
The signal said, unless you can stop them.
It was an appeal to me, but how could I respond to it? What could I do, alone out here with Anita, to cope with this enemy? Anita made no comment. I added,
That ship will land near Archimedes, I imagine, within an hour or two. If Grantline can repair his ports and I can get you inside.
Again she made no comment. Then she suddenly gripped me.
Greg, look there!
Out through the gully break in our bowl the figure of Miko showed. He was running, but not at us. Circling the summit, leaping to keep himself behind the upstanding crags. He passed the head of the staircase. He did not descend it, but headed off along the summit of the curving crater rim. I stood up to watch him. He was making off, abandoning us. He's going. I let her stand up beside me, cautiously at first, for it occurred to me that this might be a ruse to cover some other of Miko's men who might be lurking up here. But the summit seemed clear. The figure of Miko was 1,000 feet away now. We could see the tiny blob of it bobbing over the rocks. Then it plunged down, not into the crater valley, but out toward the open moon surface. Miko had abandoned his attack on us. The reason seemed plain. He had come here from his encampment with Coniston, had sent Coniston ahead to lure and kill Wilkes. When this was done, Coniston had flashed his brief signal to Miko, who was hiding nearby. It was not like the brigand leader to remain in the background. Miko was no coward. But Coniston could impersonate Wilkes, whereas Miko's giant stature at once would reveal his identity. Miko had been engaged in smashing the ports. He had looked up and seen me kill Coniston. He had come up to assail me. And then he had read Grantline's signal to me. It was his first knowledge that his ship was at hand. With the camp exits inoperative, Grantline and his men were imprisoned. Miko made an effort to kill me. He did not know my companion was Anita. The effort was taking too long. With the Grantline camp imprisoned and his ship at hand, it was Miko's best move to return to his own camp, rejoin his men, and await their opportunity to signal the ship. At least, so I reasoned it. Anita and I stood alone. What could we do? We went to the brink of the cliff. The unlighted Grantline buildings showed vaguely in the earthlight. I said,
We'll go down. I'll leave you there. You can wait at the port. They'll repair it soon, perhaps, and let you in. And what will you do?
she demanded. I was hurrying her down the stairs, but suddenly she stopped.
What are you going to do, Greg?
I had not intended to tell her.
Hurry, Anita. Why?
She stood stock still. Through the visors I could see her white face gazing at me rebelliously.
Why should I hurry, Greg? Because I want to leave you at the port. I'm going after Miko. Try and locate where he and his men are camping.
I had indeed no specific plan as yet, but it seemed useless for me to sit at the port waiting to be let in.
But he's gone, Greg.
She was right on that. Miko was already a mile or more away, down on the outer surface, making off. He would soon be out of sight. It would be impossible to follow him.
Greg, let me go with you.
She jerked away from me and bounded back up the staircase. I caught her on the summit.
Anita, I'm going with you. You're going to stay here. I am not.
This exasperating. Ugh, let's try that again. This exasperating controversy. And time was so precious.
Anita, please. I'll be safer with you than waiting here, Greg.
It almost decided me. Perhaps she would. It was only my intention to follow Miko at a distance, and with much more of this delay here, he would be lost to me. And she added,
Besides, I won't stay and you can't make me.
we ran along the crater top. At its distant edge, the lower plains spread before us. Far down and far away on the distant broken surface, the leaping figure of Miko showed. We plunged down the broken outer slope and reached the level. Soon, as we ran, the little Grantline crater faded behind us. Anita ran more skillfully than I. 10 minutes or so passed. We had seen Miko and the direction he was taking, but down here on the plain we could no longer see him. It struck me that this was purposeless and dangerous. Suppose Miko were to see us following? Suppose he stopped and lay in an ambush to fire at us as we came leaping heedlessly by?
Anita, wait.
I said, checking her. I drew her down amid a group of tumbled boulders, and then abruptly she clung to me.
Greg, I know what we can do. Greg, don't tell me you won't let me try it.
I listened to her plan. Incredible, incredibly dangerous. Yet, as I pondered it, the very daring of the thing seemed the measure of its possible success. The brigands would never imagine we could be so rash.
But Anita, Greg, you're stupid.
It was her turn to be exasperated. In truth, I was indeed in no mood for daring, for my mind was obsessed with Anita's safety. I had been planning that we might see the glow of Miko's encampment, and then return to Grantline and hope that he would have the ports repaired.
But Greg, the safety of the treasure, of all the Grantline men.
To the
Infernal with that. It's you, your safety. My safety, then. If you put me in the camp and the brigands attack it and I am killed, what then? But this plan of mine, if we can do it, Greg, safety in the end for all of us.
and it seemed possible. We crouched, discussing it. So daring a thing. The brigand ship would come down near Archimedes. That was 50 miles from Grantline. The brigands from Mars would not have seen the dark Grantline buildings hidden in the little crater pit. They would wait for Miko and his men to make their whereabouts known. Miko's encampment was ahead of us now, undoubtedly. We had been following him toward the Mare Imbrium. We were at its borders now. Archimedes from here was also about 50 miles. And Anita proposed that we go to Archimedes, climb in slope, and await the coming of the brigand ship. Miko would be off in the Mare Imbrium, or at least we hoped so. He would signal his ship, but Anita and I, closer to it, would also signal it, and, posing as brigands, could join it.
Remember, Greg, I am Anita Prince, George's sister.
Her voice trembled as. Oh, there's a comma there for some reason. Her voice trembled as she mentioned her dead brother.
They know that George was in Miko's pay, and I am his sister. It will help convince them.
This daring scheme! If we could join the ship, we might be able to persuade its leader that Miko's distant signals were merely a ruse of Grantline to lure the brigands in that direction. A long-range projector from the ship would kill Miko and his men as they came forward to join it. And then we could falsely direct the brigands, lead them away from Grantline and the treasure.
Greg, we must try it.
Heaven help me, I yielded to her persuasion. We turned at right angles and ran toward the distant frowning walls of Archimedes. Oh, geez, let's try that again. We turned at right angles and ran toward where the distant frowning walls of Archimedes loomed against the starlit sky. Man, I tell you, this tale is intense. Ray Cummings actually I assume he's dead now. I should look that up. Has a pretty good eye or pen hand for for action sequences. He seems to do a good job of having them planned out in his head, and then like that one where he's telling it kind of from two different the fight sequence in two different perspectives. I thought was pretty clever. It's kind of bold. I think I'm impressed. I have a hard time believing some of this is done uh, in the 1930s, that it's so old, because it, in my mind, to my mind and in my opinion, it holds up very well. The language and some of the punctuation is kind of awkward, and I am like very pointedly not pronouncing some of the commas because it'd be really awkward to hear, in my learned opinion. Uh, learned. I can't believe I just said that. That is so sad. That is such ego, such hubris. Okay, one sec. Composing myself. I have drunk about, what is that, a liter? No, that's like a liter and a half. I have drunk about a liter of water so far, and I've got like half a liter to go. And then I'm out of water. And, whew, I'm gonna have to pee like a really, really leaky thing eventually. But not yet. Way too much information, dude. And I apologize. But at the same time, no one, I don't think I have any viewers anyway. So, haha! Sucks to be you. Me? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Oh, man. Chapter 28. The Ascent of Archimedes. The broken, shaggy ramparts of the giant crater rose above us. We toiled upward, out of the foothills, clinging now to the crags and pitted terraces of the main ascent. An hour had passed since we turned from the borders of the Mare Imbrium. Or was it 2 hours? I could not tell. I only know that we ran with desperate, frantic haste. Anita would not admit that she was tired. She was more skillful than I in this leaping over the broken rock masses. Yet I felt that her slight strength must give out. It seemed miles up the undulating slopes of the foothills, with the black and white ramparts of the massive crater close before us. And then the main ascent. There were places where, like the smooth black frozen ice, the walls rose sheer. We avoided them, toiling aside, plunging into gullies, crossing pits where sometimes we perforce went downwards, and then up again, or sometimes we stood, hot and breathless, upon ledges, recovering our strength, selecting the best route upward. Is that route or route? This tumbled mass of rock, honeycombed everywhere with caves and passages leading into darkness impenetrable. There were pits into which we might so easily have fallen, ravines to span, sometimes with a leap, sometimes by a long and arduous detour. Endless climb. We came to a ledge, with the plains of the Mare Imbrium stretching out beneath us. We might have been upon this main ascent for an hour. The plains were far down, the broken surface down there smoothed now by the perspective of our height. And yet still above us the brooding circular wall went up into the sky. 10,000 feet of still above us. I think that was I think it was at least that, or more.
You're tired, Anita. We'd better stay here. No, if we could only get to the top, the ship may land on the other side. They would see us if we were at the top.
There was as yet no sign of the brigand ship. With every stop for rest, we searched the starry vault. The earth hung over us, flattened beyond the full. The stars blazed to mingle with the earthlight and illumine these massive crags of the Archimedes walls. But no speck appeared to tell us that the ship was up there. We were on the curving side of the Archimedes wall which fronted the Mare Imbrium to the north. The plains lay like a great frozen sea, congealed ripples shining in the light of the earth, with dark patches to mark the hollows. Somewhere down there, 6 or 8 thousand feet below us now, or even more than that for all I could tell, Miko's encampment lay concealed. We searched for lights of it, but could see none. Or had Miko rejoined his party, left his camp, and come here like ourselves to climb Archimedes? Or was our assumption wholly wrong? Perhaps the brigand ship would not land near here at all. Sweeping around from the Mare Imbrium, the plains were less smooth. The shattered, crag-littered, crater-scarred region beyond which the distant Apennines, I really did mean to look up how that was pronounced, raised their terraced walls. The little crater which concealed the Grand Line camp was off that way. There was nothing to mark it from here.
Greg, do you see anything up there? There seems to be a blur.
Sorry about that. Her sight, sharper than mine, had picked it out. The descending brigand ship. A faintest tiny blur against the stars, a few of them occulted as though strangely an invisible shadow were upon them. A growing shadow, materializing into a blur, a blob, a shape faintly defined. Then sharper until we were sure of what we saw. It was the brigand ship. It came dropping slowly, silently down. We crouched on the little ledge. A cave mouth was behind us. A gully was beside us, a break in the ledge, and at our feet the wall dropped sheer. We had extinguished our little lights. We crouched, silently gazing up into the stars. The ship, when first we distinguished it, was central over Archimedes. We thought for a while that it might descend into the crater. But it did not. It came sailing forward. I whispered into the audiophone, whispering by instinct, as though out here in all this airless desolation someone might overhear us.
It's coming over the crater.
Her hand pressed my arm in answer. I recalled that when, from the Planetara, Miko had forced Snap to signal this brigand band on Mars, Miko's only information as to the whereabouts of the Grand Line camp was that it lay between Archimedes and the Apennines. This was Grantline's first message to us, and Miko had relayed it to his men. The brigands from Mars now were following that information. A tense interval passed. We could see the ship plainly above us now, a gray-black shape among the stars up beyond the shaggy, towering crater rim. The vessel came upon a level keel, hull down, slowly circling, looking for Miko's signal, no doubt, or for possible lights of Grantline. They were also picking a landing place. We saw it soon as a cylindrical, cigar-like shape, rather smaller than the Planetara, but of similar design. It bore lights now. The ports of its hull were tiny rows of illumination, and the glow of light under its rounding upper dome was faintly visible. A bandit ship, no doubt of that. Its identification keel plate was empty of official passcode lights. These brigands had not attempted to secure official sailing lights when leaving Ferrok-Shahn. It was an outlawed ship, unmistakably. And here upon the deserted moon there was no need for secrecy. Its lights were openly displayed, that Miko might see it and join it. It went slowly past us, only a few thousand feet higher than our level. We could see the whole outline of its pointed cylinder hull, with the rounded dome on top. And under the dome was its open deck space, with a little cabin superstructure in the center. I thought for a moment that by some fortunate chance it might land quite near us. There was a wide ledge a quarter of a mile away.
Anita, look.
But it went past. And then I saw that it was heading for a level, plateau-like surface a few miles further on. It dropped, cautiously floating down. There was still no sign of Miko, but I realized that haste was necessary. We must be the first to join the brigand ship. I lifted Anita to her feet.
I don't think we should signal from here. No, Miko might see it.
We could not tell where he was. Down on the plains, perhaps? Or up here, somewhere in these miles of towering rocks.
Are you ready, Anita? Yes, Greg.
I stared through the visors at her white, solemn face.
Yes, I'm ready,
She repeated. Her hand pressure seemed to me suddenly like a farewell. We were plunging rashly into what was destined to meet. Oh, wow. Let's try that again. That was the opposite of what I meant. We were. I did it again, my gosh. Were we plunging rashly into what was destined to mean our death? Was this a farewell? An instinct swept me not to do this thing. Why, in an hour or two I could have Anita back in the comparative safety of the Grantline buildings. The exit ports would doubtless be repaired by now. I could get her inside. She had bounded away from me, leaped down some 30 feet into the broken gully, to cross it and then up on the other side. I stood for an instant watching her fantastic shape, with the great rounded, goggled, trunked helmet and the lump on her shoulders which held the little Erentz motors. Then I made after her. It did not take us long, 2 or 3 miles of circling along the giant wall. The ship lay only a few hundred feet above our level. We stood at last on a butt-like pinnacle. The hull port lights of the ship were close over us. And there were moving lights up there, tiny moving spots on the adjacent rocks. The brigands had come out, prowling around to investigate their location. No signal yet from Miko, but it might come at any moment.
I'll flash now,
I whispered.
Yes.
The brigands had probably not yet seen us. I took the lamp from my helmet. My hand was trembling. Suppose my signal were answered by a shot? A flash from some giant projector mounted on the ship? Anita crouched behind a rock, as she had promised. I stood with my torch and flung its switch. My puny light beam shot up. I waved it, touched the ship with its faint glowing circle of illumination. They saw me. There was a sudden movement among the lights up there. I semaphored. I am from Miko. Do not fire. I used the open universal code. In Martian first, and then in English. There was no answer, but no attack. I tried again. This is Haljan, once of the Planetara. George Prince's sister is with me. There has been disaster to Miko. A small light beam came down from the brink of the overhead cliff beside the ship. We read you. I went steadily on. Disaster. The Planetara is wrecked. All killed but me and George Prince's sister. We want to join you. I flashed off my light. The answer came. Where is the Grantline camp? Near here, the Mare Imbrium. As though to answer my lie, from down on the Earth-lit plains, 10 miles or so from the crater base, a tiny signal light shot up. Anita saw it and gripped me.
There's Miko's light.
It spelled in Martian, "Come down, land Mare Imbrium." Miko had seen the signaling up here and was joining it. He repeated, "Land Mare Imbrium." I flashed a protest up to the ship. "Beware, that is Grantline. Trickery." From the ship the summons came. "Come up." We had won this first encounter. Miko must have realized his disadvantage. His distant light went out.
Come, Anita.
But there was no retreat now. But again I seemed to feel the pressure of her hand, that vague. Oh gosh, we mangled it again. I'm reading too quickly and I apologize. But again I seemed to feel in the pressure of her hand that vague farewell. Her voice whispered,
We must do our best, act our best to be convincing.
In the white glow of a search beam we climbed the crags, reached the broad upper ledge. Helmeted figures rushed at us, searched us for weapons, seized our helmet lights. The evil face of a giant Martian peered at me through the visors. 2 other monstrous, towering figures seized Anita. We were shoved toward the port locks at the base of the ship's hull. Above the hull bulge I could see the grids of projectors mounted in the dome side, and the figures of men standing on the deck, peering down at us. We went through the admission locks up into a hull corridor, up an incline passage, and reached the lighted deck. Our helmets were taken off. The Martian brigands crowded around us. All right, we actually made better time than I thought, so I think I can get one more chapter in. Oh yeah, for sure. I can get another chapter in. Shoot. Let me see how long it takes to do the next chapter, and maybe... Oh no, the one after that is like twice as long. Okay. Jeez Louise. Okay, so this entire segment, this installment, I should say, was actually quite a bit shorter than the first 2, which is good, I guess. I don't know how long the final installment is, part 4 of 4. Um, but we will find out, yeah. Okay, yeah, yeah. Oh wow. Okay, sorry about the pause. I was reading ahead a bit. Um, I have to come up with new Martian voices, so this is going to be real tricky. Um, okay. Uh, so this will be fun. How many Martian voices am I going to have to do? I don't know. At least one. Oh boy. Okay. Well, to anyone tuned in, I would like to remind the listeners that, well, these are all done live. In fact, in many cases, they are not books I've or stories I have even read before, so I'm doing them more or less blind. Partly for the challenge and partly because I want to read them and enjoy them as I'm reading them aloud. This is not always the case. Like when I did read-throughs of Greg Egan's Axiomatic, I had already read through that one. And the same for Snow Crash and Blind Sight. I had already read through those. If I had been doing Blind Sight the first time, uh, when I read that one aloud, I would have probably been interspersing like every other page. Holy shit, that's cool. So I was able to control myself a bit. Um, yeah. All right, frigate. Let's do it. Let's do this next chapter. Why not? And then we'll see what our time looks like. Mm. I am gonna have to call it one way or the other when I run out of water because I can't do this for long without lubrication, if you will. Chapter 29 On the Brigand Ship. Anita's words echoed in my memory. We must act our best to be convincing. It was not her ability that I doubted so much as my own. She had played the part of George Prince cleverly, unmasked only by an evil chance. I steeled myself to face the searching glances of the brigands as they shoved around us. This was a desperate game into which we had plunged. For all our acting, how easy it would be for some small chance thing abruptly to undo us. I realized it, and now, as I gazed into the peering faces of these men from Mars, I cursed my witless rashness which had brought Anita into this. The brigands, some 10 or 15 of them here on the deck, stood in a ring around us. They were all big men, nearly of a 7-foot average, dressed in leather jerkins and short leather breeches, with bare knees and flaring leather boots. Piratical swaggering fellows, knife blades mingled with small hand projectors, fastened to their belts. Gray, heavy faces, some with scraggling unshaved beard. They plucked at us, jabbering in Martian. One of them seemed the leader. I said sharply, "Are you the commander here? I speak not Ilton well. You speak the Earth English?" And there is a footnote here. Ilton, the ruling race and official language of the Martian Union. Yes, he said readily. I am commander here. He spoke English with the same freedom and accent of Miko. I guess that makes it easy. Is this George Prince's sister? Yes, her name is Anita Prince. Tell your men to take their hands off her. He waved his men away. They all seemed more interested in Anita than in me. He added, I am Seth Potan. He addressed Anita. George Prince's sister? You are called Anita? I have heard of you. I knew your brother. Indeed, you look very much like him. He swept his plumed hat to the grid with a swaggering gesture of homage. A courtier-like fellow this, debonair as a Venus cavalier. He accepted us. I realized that Anita's presence was immensely valuable in making us convincing. Yet there was about this Potan, as with Miko, a disturbing suggestion of irony. I could not make him out. I decided that we had fooled him. Then I remarked the steely glitter of his eyes as he turned to me. You were an officer of the Planetara? The insignia of my rank was visible on my white jacket collar, which showed beneath the errant's suit, now that my helmet was off. Yes, I was supposed to be, but a year ago I embarked upon this adventure with Miko. He was leading us to his cabin. The Planetara wrecked? Miko dead? And Han and Coniston. George Prince, too. We are the only survivors. While we divested ourselves of our errant suits at his command, I told him briefly of the Planetara's fall. All had been killed on board save Anita and me. We had escaped, awaited his coming. The treasure was here. We had located the Grantline camp and were ready to lead him to it. Did he believe me? He listened quietly. He seemed not shocked at the death of his comrades, nor yet pleased, merely imperturbable. I added with a sly, sidelong glance, "There were too many of us on the Planetara. The purser had joined us, and many of the crew. And there was Miko's sister, the Seta Moa. Too many. The treasure divides better among less." An amused smile played on his thin gray lips, but he nodded. The fear which had leaped in me was allayed by his next words. "True enough, Algin. He was a domineering fellow, Miko. A third of it all was for him alone. But now the third would go to this sub-leader, Potan." The implication was obvious. I said, "Before we go any further, can I trust you for my share?" "Of course." I figured that my very boldness in bargaining so prematurely would convince him. I insisted, "And Miss Prince, she will have her brother's share?" Clever Anita. She put in swiftly, "I give no information until you promise. We know the location of the Grantline camp, its weapons, its defenses, the amount and location of the ore. I warn you, if you do not play us fair—" He laughed heartily. He seemed to like us. He spread his huge legs as he lounged in his settle. Is that supposed to be settee? No, it's settle. And drank of the bowl which one of his men set before him. "Little tigress, fear me not. I play fair." He pushed two of the bowls across the table. "Drink, Aljan. All is well with us, and I am glad to hear it. Miss Prince, drink my health as your leader." I waved it away from Anita. We need all our wits. Your strong Martian drinks are dangerous. Look here, I'll tell you just how this situation stands." I plunged into a glib account of our supposed wanderings to find the Grantline camp, its location off in the Mare Imbrium, hidden in a cavern there. Potan, with the drink, and under the gaze of Anita's eyes, was in high good humor. He laughed when I told him that we had dared to invade the Grantline camp, had smashed its exit ports, had even gotten up to have a look where the ore was piled. "Well done, Haljan. You're a fellow to my liking." But his gaze was on Anita. "You dress like a man, or a charming boy." She still wore the dark clothes of her brother. She said, "I'm used to action. Man's garb pleases me. You shall treat me like a man, and give me my share of the gold leaf." He had already demanded of us the meaning of that signal from the Mare Imbrium. Miko's signal. It had not come again, though any moment I feared it. I told him that Grantline had doubtless repaired his damaged ports and sallied out to assail me in reprisal, and seeing the brigand ship landing on Archimedes, had tried to lure it. I wondered if my explanations were very convincing. It did not sound so, but he was flushed now with the drink, and Anita added, "Grantline knows the territory near his camp very well. He is equipped only for short-range fighting." I took it up. "It's like this, Potan. If he could get you to land unsuspectingly near the mouth of his cavern—" I pictured how Grantline might have figured on a sudden surprise attack upon the ship. It was his only chance to catch it unprepared. We were all three in friendly, intimate mood now. Potan said, "We'll land down there right enough, but I need a few hours for my assembling." "He will not dare advance," I said. "For one thing, he can't leave the treasure." "He knows we have unmasked his lure," Anita put in smilingly. "Haljan and I joining you. That silenced him. His light went out very promptly, didn't it?" She flashed me a side gaze. Were we acting convincingly? But if Miko started up his signals again, they might so quickly betray us. Anita's thoughts were upon that, for she added, Grantline will not dare show his light. If he does, Set Potan, we can blast him with a ray from here, can't we?
Yes, Potan agreed. If he comes within 10 miles, I have one powerful enough. We are assembling it now.
And we have 30 men? Anita persisted. When we sail down to attack him, it should not be very difficult to kill all the Grantline party. 30 of us. That's enough to share in this treasure. I'm glad Miko is dead.
By heaven, Haljan, this girl of yours is small but very bloodthirsty. That accursed Miko murdered her brother, I explained.
Acting. And never once did we dare relax. If only Miko's signals would hold off and give us time. We may have talked for half an hour. We were in a small, steel-lined cubby, located in the forward deck space of the ship. The dome was over it. I could see from where I sat at the table that there was a forward observatory tower under the dome quite near here. The ship was laid out in rather similar fashion to the Planetara, though considerably smaller. Potan had dismissed his men from his cubby, so as to be alone with us. Out on the deck I could see them dragging apparatus about, bringing the mechanisms of giant projectors up from below, beginning to assemble them. Occasionally some of the men would come to our cubby windows to peer in at us curiously. My mind was roaming as I talked. For all my manner of casualness, I knew that haste was necessary. Whatever Anita and I were to do must be done quickly. But to win this fellow's utter confidence first was necessary, so that we might have the freedom of the ship, might move about unnoticed, unwatched. I was horribly tense inside. Through the dome windows across the deck from the cubby, the rocks of the lunar landscape were visible. I could see the brink of this let's try that again. I could see the brink of this ledge upon which the ship lay, the descending crags down the precipitous wall of the Archimedes to the earthlit plains far below. Miko, Moa, and a few of the Planetara's crew were down there somewhere. Anita and I had a fairly definite plan. We were now in Potan's confidence. With this interview at an end, I felt that our status among the brigands would be established. We would be free to move about the ship, join in its activities. It ought to be possible to locate the signal room, get friendly with the operator there. Perhaps we would find a secret opportunity to flash a signal to Earth. This ship, I was confident, would have the power for a long-range signal, if not of too sustained a length. It was a desperate thing to attempt, but our whole procedure was desperate. And I felt, if Anita perhaps could cajole the guard or the duty man from the signal room, I might send a single flash or two that would reach Earth. Just a distress call, signed Grantline. If I could do that, and not get caught. Anita was engaging Potan in talking of his plans. The brigand leader was boasting of his well-equipped ship, the daring of his men, and questioning her about the size of the treasure. My thoughts were free to roam. A signal to Earth. And while we were making friends with these brigands, the longest-range electronic projector was being assembled. Miko then could flash his signal and be damned to him. I would be on the deck with that projector. Its operator, and I... As its operator, I would turn it upon Miko. One flash of it, and he and his little band would be wiped out. But there was our escape to be thought of. We could not remain very long with these brigands. We could tell them that the Grantline camp was on the Mare Imbrium. It would delay them for a time, but our lie would soon be discovered. We must escape from them, get away and back to Grantline. With Miko dead, a distress signal to Earth, and Potan in ignorance of Grantline's location, the treasure would be safe until help arrived from Earth. It all fitted together so nicely. It seemed possible of success. Our futile plans, star-crossed always, doomed, fated always to be upset by such unforeseen evil chances. By the infernal, little Anita, you look like a dove, but you're a tigress, a comrade after my own heart, bloodthirsty as a fire worshipper. Her laugh rang out to mingle with his. "Oh no, Set Potan, I am treasure thirsty." "We'll get the treasure, never fear, little Anita." "With you to lead us, Potan, I'm sure we will." A man entered the cubby. Potan looked frowningly around. "What is it, Argyle?" The fellow answered in Martian, leered at Anita, and withdrew. Potan stood up. I noticed that he was unsteady with the drink. "They want me with the work at the projectors." "Go ahead," I said. He nodded. We were comrades now. "Amuse yourself, Elgin. Or come out on deck if you wish. I will tell my men you are one of us." "And tell them to keep their hands off Miss Prince." He stared at me. "I had not thought of that. A woman among so many men." His own gaze at Anita was as leeringly offensive as any of his men could have given. As yes. He said, "Have no fear, little tigress." Anita laughed. "I am afraid of nothing." But when he had lurched from the cabin, she touched me, smiled with her mannish swagger, for fear we were still observed, and murmured, "Oh, Greg, I'm afraid." We stayed in the cubby a few moments, whispering, trying to plan. "You think the signal room is in the tower, Greg? This tower outside our window here?" "Yes, I think so." "Shall we go out and see?" "Yes, keep near me always." "Oh, Greg, I will." We deposited our errant suits carefully in a corner of the cubby. We might need them so suddenly. Then we swaggered out to join the brigands working on the deck. And with that, I am going to call it because I just ran out of water, and it's as logical a stopping point as any because it's the end of the chapter, which is nice. Um, so yeah, next week I'll probably either cut it super duper short, um, which I may have to do anyway because next week is the 23rd, and I do actually have some stuff going on that day, so cutting it short might actually work out for the best anyway. Um, so yeah, hope people are enjoying these. I have no idea who tunes in when. Um, if you are tuning in, great. If you're not, great, I guess. Doing whatever. Any feedback is always desirable. I'll try and get this one uploaded to my YouTube sooner rather than later, as opposed to like 2 weeks late. Um, it's much easier if I just stay on top of it because it takes forever to upload these to YouTube. It just sits there and sits there and sits there and sits there. It drives me absolutely bonkers. If I have to do a lot at once, if it's one movie, it's nothing. Even if it's 2 hours long, it's nothing. Yeah. So as always, I do stream to multiple platforms: Facebook, Twitch, Mixer, normally YouTube, but of course there are some impediments to me doing that right now. The less said on that, the better. Needless to say, I can still upload the videos, just not stream there at the moment because I'm dumb and I made mistakes, and that's fine. I have other streams throughout the week. I do a Mecha Mondays stream where I stream something giant robot or giant robot related or mecha adjacent. And I also have a Warframe Wednesday stream where I do something Warframe related for a couple hours on Wednesdays, and then Storytime Saturdays, which hopefully people have listened to just now, where I read short stories or books aloud for pleasure and the fun of doing it. And hey, if I'm getting people to watch or listen to these, um, and expanding their mind and thrilling them beyond all measure, so much the better, as far as I'm concerned. Because this stuff's really cool, and I like it, and I hope other people like it too. So yeah, that's about it. I'm Fragath, and this has been Storytime Saturdays. And have a great week and stuff. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.